This is When Science Speaks, a new web series profiling innovative and interesting people working in science and technical fields, from academia to industry to the nonprofit world. We explore how to be a powerhouse advocate for science and your research, how to advance your career in meaningful ways that make you happy, and how to push back on the ongoing assault on science and other related issues of interest happening in the world.
Well, hey, everyone, it's Mark Bayer, and you are tuned to When Science Speaks. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode today. Today's episode is brought to you by Bayer Strategic Consulting in Washington, D.C., which helps scientists and engineers get funding, gain influence, and build relationships with the stakeholders who matter most in their professional environment. It is so wonderful to have John Fraser on the show today. John is president of Burnside Development and Associates, which is focused on academic technology transfer, commercialization, and startup formation and financing. Before starting his firm, John was assistant vice president for research and economic development at Florida State University. Prior to Florida State, John served as executive vice president and co-founder of UTC, a venture capital-backed university licensing technology transfer firm, and also as vice president of TDC Incorporated, a Canada-based venture capital investment firm. John has co-founded 3 companies, assisted entrepreneurs to launch another 40-plus university technology-based firms, and created or headed 4 university technology commercialization organizations. John has served as elected president and chair of the board of AUTUM, the Global Association of Academic Technology Transfer Professionals. In 2020, John was awarded AUTUM's highest annual award in recognition of outstanding service to the academic technology transfer community around the world. John holds a master's degree in biochemistry from the University of California, Berkeley. Welcome to the show, John. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure.
You know, you are such an expert in university research and have been for quite a long time, as I mentioned in the intro. Can you give listeners a sense of the economic impact of these academic licensed products, and maybe also what some misconceptions there are out there, or even just complete blind spots that many people have about university-based research?
Certainly. Economic impact and blind spots. Your listeners may not realize that many of the products we use every day were invented on a university campus and developed into a product by a collaborating company. I'll give you some example so that people can begin to understand part of the economic impact. Did you know that Gatorade, the sports drink, was invented at the University of Florida and then developed and marketed by PepsiCo? Did you know that Taxol, a major anti-cancer drug, the method to manufacture it was invented at Florida State University and licensed to Bristol Myers Squibb? Did you know that certain varieties of strawberries were created and distributed through nurseries from the University of California? I'll remind people that insulin was discovered at the University of Toronto and brought to the market by its collaborator, Eli Lilly. Mm-hmm. And most recently this year, during the COVID pandemic, one of the leading vaccine companies is Moderna. It actually was spun out of MIT to commercialize several types of novel technologies, hopefully into a vaccine. These technologies came from MIT and other universities. And again, during the pandemic, most universities have decided to make any of their technologies available on a cost-free basis in order to hasten use of this great pool of creativity to fight the pandemic. In addition to that, our professional society, AUTUM, records and gathers information every year. And just last year, 800 new products entered the US market, each based on an invention inside the country. This happens every single year. Exactly the same thing is happening in Canada, the United Kingdom, Europe, as well as most other countries around the globe, India, Australia, Japan, China. Now, that's kind of the anecdote sense. So you can begin to understand the economic impact is something that you use every single day. A study was done recently that looked at it from a broader viewpoint and asked the question, okay, over the past 20 years, what sort of impact have all of these US inventions licensed to companies had in terms of jobs and sales of useful products? And the answer was surprising. The product sales over 20 years range from 320 billion to 1.3 trillion. Okay. And the total number of jobs created during the same 20-year time period range from about 1 million to over almost 4.3 million jobs, all in the United States, based on the commercialization of university research.
Those are obviously very significant and big numbers. You also mentioned, John, these other countries' efforts at commercialization, tech transfer in other countries. And I'm wondering, oftentimes we think about U.S. as being unique in its, entrepreneurial maybe spirit or, acceptance within culture, or even the fact that entrepreneurs are often revered, in U.S. culture, and that's not necessarily the same in around the world. Any thoughts about how we're doing, meaning U.S.-based universities, compared to other universities in these countries that you mentioned?
The comparisons are being done every year. Our professional society is a global society, and it interacts with sister societies who, like Autumn, collect data every single year on this academic tech transfer activity. Turns out, given that the US started in this activity a long time ago, largely after an act of Congress in 1980, other countries began to see the economic impact of converting taxpayers' money that was used to perform research on university campuses to create inventions that then were developed into products by companies. So let's take the United Kingdom. Their economy is a lot smaller than the United States. So what they decided to do a couple of decades ago was, rather than licensing to existing companies primarily, they decided they would encourage the creation of small startup companies. In other words, university technology-based firms. And they realized that this would impact their manufacturing base, the jobs created inside the country, more than licensing to existing companies, most of which existed outside the United Kingdom, where the jobs were being created.
Interesting. Really, really interesting. Thanks for making that distinction and explaining it that way. Thinking about the many university technology-based firms that you specifically have helped as far as your launch and your expertise, what are some of the common qualities or knowledge that you've seen among the successful ones? And maybe also any founder traits you've seen again and again that tend to doom a startup?
In order to answer that, Mark, let me back up a bit. Because the idea of universities creating inventions or startup companies is very surprising to people. We know that the prime purpose of a university or higher education is to educate the next generation of citizens, to create new knowledge through research performed on the campus. And then the university serves the community largely by graduating students and also professionals from schools of medicine, law, business, veterinary science, dentistry, what have you. That's the core function of a university. It has been for 800 years. A relatively new activity is connecting the research to the local community to accelerate economic development, and that improves the US economy. The commercialization of this research took off, as I said, when Senators Bayh and Dole presented an act that was signed in 1980, 40 years ago. Most of the commercialization inside the United States, roughly 6,000 licenses or options to a license, go to firms every single year, of which 20% are to these technology-based spin-out companies.
Mm-hmm.
Only a third go to the big multinationals, and roughly 50% go to America's small companies, which are defined as having less than 500 employees. So 20% of the licenses are these small startups. The universities, their leadership, their faculty realize this is a creative activity and appropriate to happen on a campus. And so they support it and are beginning to educate faculty and students about what it takes to actually be entrepreneurial, spin a technology off the campus into one of these small startups and try and develop it into a successful firm. So the answer with that background to your question of some of the common characteristics that I've seen over my roughly 30 plus years in Canada and largely in the United States is that those researchers, founders, who hire experienced business people to actually run the company are the most successful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I've seen a couple of situations where the research founders decide to do it themselves.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it just hasn't happened. It doesn't go anywhere and everybody gets frustrated.
Right. Which kind of leads very nicely into my next question, John, because you and I had a chance to talk offline about the training that academic scientists receive in translational science and commercialization. And, we were talking and you'd mentioned that university-based scientists, they're not receiving training, in general in launching startups. And so for university-based researchers who are listening, who are interested in entrepreneurship or in launching or joining a startup, what types of training and experiences should they seek out?
That's a really good question. And here's my answer. Those that are curious about this activity need to do homework. And the way to do it is look inside your institution. There's usually an office of partnerships, office of commercialization, office of technology transfer. And going in and talking about what this entrepreneurial activity is about is a good start. Most such offices offer webinars, courses, receptions to bring people together to really understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. So either do your homework on campus or in your local economic development organization in your county. They can plug you into the networks of local entrepreneurs so that the person who's interested can get out and talk to people who have been there, done that, mm-hmm. and really understand what it's all about, as opposed to, wow, I can be an entrepreneur like Steve Jobs was, and I can really change the world. You need to do some homework and find out just how tough a slog it is. Right.
And maybe that's one of the mindset shifts that has to happen. You talk about the substantive skills that need to be learned and, in doing your research, but also, kind of just a different outlook and a different frame of mind that you now need to apply if you're thinking about moving into entrepreneurship from a traditional university type of research career.
Mindset. Well, the first thing is this. You may think your idea is the best thing since sliced bread, but unless others in your potential market think it is, you're doomed to failure. Mm-hmm. So you got to shift your mindset and listen to what others have to say about your ideas. That's the first suggestion I'd make. Mm-hmm. The second mind shift is you have this enthusiasm, you're interested, go home and talk to your significant other and your family, okay? Most researchers are already committed to their family, their employer, perhaps for activities and commitments to their church or community groups. So getting the real day-to-day support from the family to explore this entrepreneurial thing, you're going to have to cut back on these other commitments. Mm. So you really need to go back to the home base and have a conversation. That's a mindset. Normally in a lab, you're just focused on what you're doing. This is a situation where you've got to go back and talk to the family.
Right. Excellent point. Excellent point. Now, a lot of our listeners are university leaders in administration and related topics. And so I want to ask you what key strategic and tactical steps should be taken and missteps avoided when a university decides to make commercialization activities more prominent on its campus.
Let me answer that by saying, your question is, what should the institution do to encourage this commercialization attitude amongst its employees?
Right.
Well, the first time I saw this done right, it was done at the University of Wisconsin, probably about 10 years ago. They gathered a committee of employees and outside people to talk about just this issue. Then they published a letter, which the president signed, and basically said to all the employees, our basic purpose is education, research, and community service. However, we believe that this commercialization technology transfer activity will positively impact our core mission and help us further serve those who support us financially, our government, fellow citizens, and families of the students. So we want to encourage it. The letter went on to say, here's a process that we're going to adapt. Okay. First, go talk to your family. Then talk to your supervisor. Then find an off-campus business partner very early in this. And together with them, create a short business plan to show how you're going to commercialize your taxpayer-funded research results. Turn them into useful products. Bring that, your partner and the plan, into the commercialization office at the university, and we'll provide you with the legal rights to commercialize your research, and wish you well. If you want to create a startup company, the university will not finance it, but we'll provide you the commercial rights for you to go out and try and hire employees and raise money from angel investors and others. That's how we'll do it, by saying it's academically acceptable to be doing the planning and thinking like this on the campus. And at some point, you move and create a company off campus. You yourself may want to stay and serve as an advisor, perfectly fine. And then we want to see a lot of this happening. So that's what I think institutions can do. Send out a signal, it's acceptable, provide a clear process, support people who want to try it, tell people to really get a realistic view about what it's all about, so that when confronted with the first couple of challenges, they don't just simply fold their cards and give up. We, the institution, from the statistics that I've talked to earlier on, think this is something that will enhance the reputation of the institution. We think that it'll show people that the university is engaged with the solution of real problems. And frankly, through this mechanism and licensing to additional companies, these products that I mentioned will show the world that we're not any longer an ivory tower. We're deeply engaged with the community. And this is one particular aspect of that.
Yeah, really, really interesting, really interesting. And, that as you're talking, I'm thinking about our current situation here in the pandemic, and the university system, as you know, is in the process of massive change as a result of a variety of factors, including the pandemic, of course. And how do you view this dynamic? That is the increasing need for natural and social science PhDs and trainees to learn skills such as business concepts for scientists, for example.
Well, again, let me back up a bit. The business model, I'll call it, of a university has been relatively unchanged since the first universities were created in Western civilization, in Italy, the United Kingdom. I mean, we're talking, 700-800 years ago. And the model has not really changed much. Why? Because the core mission of education, the next generation, new knowledge, and community service, universities have been the only place where that really all comes together and consistently has been offered to society over centuries. Okay. So the core values won't change. The way in which they're delivered, the way in which they're perceived do change dramatically. And I think the COVID really caused the universities to sit up. Why? Because their cash flow was hammered. Students looked at this and said, I want to get the degree, I want the social interaction, but I can't have it. So I'm not going to go this time. The universities have been forced into, okay, what do we have to do? Well, some modest changes, not to the core mission, but to the delivery function are, let's do this remotely. Good. Let's offer some very, very current courses and support, such as you say, to help science PhDs and others to learn skills about business concepts, expose them to this as a career opportunity. These are now being offered. This is being done, and I think we'll see more of it. But again, if you were Rip Van Winkle, Mark, and went to sleep today and woke up 500 years in the future, I think you'd recognize the institution called university when you woke up.
Right,
okay,
right.
Same core values because we need them, but the delivery mechanisms, the perception of why they're important, that'll change.
Really interesting. We're at an inflection point here when it comes to so many things, and it sounds like the university as an institution is part of that. John Fraser, it was wonderful to have you on the show. You have this incredible wealth of information and expertise developed over the decades, going back to the beginning, really, of the focus on university commercialization with the Dole-By Act. So thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us here.
Mark, it's been my pleasure. I hope your audience enjoys it. I'm currently retired from a salaried position, but offering my services largely outside the United States, Southeast Asia, India, Chile, Serbia, and also I serve as entrepreneur in residence at NIST, the major federal laboratory just up the road from where we are. So, pleased to talk to you. Love to do it again. Hope your listeners enjoyed it.
Thank you. And listeners, thank you so much for being here on this episode of When Science Speaks. I hope you'll be back next time for the next episode of When Science Speaks.
This is When Science Speaks, a new web series profiling innovative and interesting people working in science and technical fields, from academia to industry to the nonprofit world. We explore how to be a powerhouse advocate for science and your research, how to advance your career in meaningful ways that make you happy, and how to push back on the ongoing assault on science and other related issues of interest happening in the world.